Okay, we're in the home stretch, weeks 19 through 24. Woo! Can't believe it. Okay, we ended with Lincoln's War between the states. Now we're going to do some reconstructing, okay? So Lincoln's War between the states, reconstruction of the southern states, dominion of Canada, and then we're going to go O, V, B, and a G. I know that's kind of tricky, but it really fits well. Otto von Bismarck unifies Germany. We're going to make two G's for unifies Germany, which will become our guns for the Boer Wars in Africa. And then our fingers become the shawls over the Spanish woman's shoulders, because that's the sign for Spain. The Spanish-American War, remember wars like this, and then the progressive era. The sign and sign language for progress is this. It's like forward movement. So the progressive era, and then you're right here to make your Australian kangaroos hop. Australia becomes a commonwealth. This in sign language is common. So we're just going to sweep it over the land and then make those M's and do the same motion again for Mexican Revolution, World War I, and President Wilson. This is the sign for president, so we're going to say President Wilson and end with W's. Then we make an L for Lenin, a B for Bolshevik, and we're going to do the same sign again around for revolution in Russia. Okay, we're going to rush like we did before. So Lenin and Bolshevik, revolution in Russia. Now bring your hands together. U.S. Evangelist is someone who speaks out their mouth the good news, and in this case about the Bible, which is Billy Graham, Bible. Okay, so U.S. Evangelist Billy Graham, and then modern is, this is the sign for now or present, and so modern period of the arts, the Great Depression, and then this is the sign and sign language for new, so we're going to say, and the New Deal. Then W's and a 2 for World War II, make the sign again for president, but this time end in R's for President Roosevelt. And President Franklin D. Roosevelt, and then we're going to stall, okay? It's like we've been running and we stall. So use those R's for a memory cue. Running, Roosevelt, stall, Stalin of the USSR, and then we're just going to make a grimacy face for and the Katyn massacre. Okay, so got that? World War II and President Franklin D. Roosevelt, Stalin of the USSR and the Katyn massacre. Then the United Nations formed, and then right here, it's like you're warming up by a fire, okay? The Cold War, and your hands right here will make, oftentimes you see pictures of Gandhi, and he has his prayer hands right here on his chin and in front of his face. So because we were right here for the Cold War, it's easy to remember. We bring it up for Gandhi, and India's, we're going to make two I's, India's independence. You know, this is the sign for freedom, but we're going to use I's because we're talking about India. Now make J's, Jewish state established. Now make a C and tap it twice. That's a sign for communist. We're going to say Mao and communist victory in China, and your C is right there for China. Mao and communist victory in China. Now, right here, you're going to say North Atlantic Treaty. Okay, you got your Atlantic Treaty. All right, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Later we say the Atlantic Treaty. There's a big difference here, and we need to know which one is which. North Atlantic Treaty Organization, you go from O to K. Everybody say, okay. Okay, so North Atlantic Treaty Organization, make two K's for the Korean War. Now your K's then come up to your heart and come down, because this is the sign for King. Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement. This is the sign and sign language for walk. And during the civil rights movement, there were walks of protests and picketing in the streets. And streets were filled with signs and people who would walk and strike. So we're going to do this. So Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights movement. And then watch this. Right out here you have Jim and Elizabeth Elliot, missionaries in Ecuador. Now here's the other one, the Atlantic Treaty, and we're not going to say organization, so we know that this one doesn't go to a K, it goes to a V, okay? So you're going to leave this part out that makes it a K because there was no O for organization, it's just a V. And then that helps you know it's the Vietnam War, all right? So Jim and Elizabeth Elliot, missionaries in Ecuador, the Atlantic Treaty, the Vietnam War, and then right here, look, pull your hand up, and this is the sign, a U, that's a U, U.S., and you're going to shoot the astronauts up because this is the sign for astronaut. U.S. astronauts, and we've already learned what walk is, so they're going to walk on the moon. Now, your hands are right in front of your face, and it just so happens that the sign and sign language for information is like this. So perfect position to say age of information, and then we're going to take that information all around the globe. And globalization, circa 1970 to the present. We've already learned that modern or present, or if you don't want to use the same sign, you can just say like this for now, in the present. Now Watergate, take the W and put it up by your face. This is the sign for water. Watergate, and we're going to make another president. Nixon resigns. And he said, I surrender, I resign. And that's what that means in sign language. President Nixon resigns. Then the fall of communism in Eastern Europe, make two E's, Eastern Europe. Then you already have your E's for European nation formed. And then right here you're going to divide like this. Apartheid is when they were very segregated. White people and black people had different bathrooms, and it wasn't until a lot later in the timeline that South Africa abolished apartheid. So we say apartheid abolished in South Africa. Now when you count in sign language, it's like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you take your thumb and you tap from the back down. So 6, 7, 8, 9. This is what a 9 looks like. Your fingers are kind of flat and your 3 are up. So the sign in sign language for 9/11, September 11th, is actually 9/11. So we're going to say September 11th on one hand, and then on the other hand say 2001. And now we're at the very end. You have 2 fingers, and we're going to say rising tide of freedom. Other hand, rising tide of freedom. I'm going to do the whole thing one more time. Lincoln's War between the states, reconstruction of the southern states, Dominion of Canada, Otto von Bismarck unifies Germany, 4 wars in Africa, the Spanish-American War, the Progressive Era, Australia becomes a Commonwealth, Mexican Revolution, World War I, and President Wilson, Lenin and the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, U.S. evangelist Billy Graham, modern period of the arts, the Great Depression, and the New Deal, World War II and President Franklin D. Roosevelt, Stalin of the USSR and the Katyn Massacre, the United Nations formed, the Cold War, Gandhi and India's independence, Jewish state established, Mao and communist victory in China, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, remember OK, the Korean War, Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement, Jim and Elizabeth Elliot, missionaries in Ecuador, the Atlantic Treaty, the Vietnam War, U.S. astronauts walk on the moon. age of information and globalization, circa 1970 to the present. Watergate, President Nixon resigns. The fall of communism in Eastern Europe, European nation formed, apartheid abolished in South Africa, September 11th, 2001. Rising tide of freedom, rising tide of freedom. Timeline, this is my timeline. I'm part of my timeline. I hope that you've enjoyed this as much as my family has and that it's helped you. And I'll put the whole thing to music sometime in the next couple of days.